This is Static Whisper Stories. It had never once been wrong until it flagged her. What if a machine told you that you were going to die and it had never been wrong? Not a fortune teller, not a ghost, a hospital AI, a system built by engineers at one of the most prestigious medical technology firms in the country, running on 17 servers in a climate-controlled basement in Portland, Oregon. A system that had predicted 41 deaths, 41, with 100% accuracy. And on a Tuesday morning in October, it added a new name to its list. Staff ID 0047, Elena Vasquez, age 29, health status optimal. She had no diagnosis, no symptoms, no medical history that would concern anyone, but the machine had flagged her, and it had never been wrong. My name is Dr. Marcus Webb, and I was the one who built that system. I need you to understand that before I tell you the rest of this story. I need you to understand that what happened at Hargrove Medical Center was not a malfunction. It was not a glitch. It was not a bug in the code that I missed during testing. What happened at Hargrove was exactly what the system was designed to do. That's what makes it so much worse. I came to Hargrove in March of that year, contracted by the hospital's parent company to implement what we internally called Project Ether. The acronym stood for Adaptive Early Threat and Health Evaluation Response, a name that a marketing team had spent 6 weeks designing and that I privately thought was overlong and a little absurd. But the system itself was not absurd. Far from it. Ether was a predictive patient monitoring AI designed to identify patients at elevated risk of rapid deterioration, specifically those who might experience sudden cardiac events, septic shock, or multi-organ failure before standard diagnostic tools could catch it. The logic was simple. If you could predict a crisis 48 to 72 hours before it happened, you could intervene. You could move patients to ICU preemptively. You could adjust medications. You could save lives. The system pulled from an extraordinary volume of data. Vitals, obviously, heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, temperature, but also subtler things. The micro-fluctuations in a patient's movement patterns captured by pressure-sensitive beds. The small chemical signatures in the air recycled through room ventilation. Facial micro-expression data from corridor cameras. Voice stress patterns from nurse-patient interactions recorded for quality assurance. Even typing speed and error rates on the patient portal tablets, which apparently correlate with certain neurological deterioration patterns at a level invisible to human observation. Ether had been trained on 11 years of anonymized patient outcome data from 6 hospitals across 3 countries. It had been tested in simulation environments for 2 years before deployment, and it worked. God help me. It worked better than anyone expected. The first flagging occurred 9 days after we went live. Patient Harold Breen, 73 years old, admitted for a hip replacement procedure. Routine surgery, clean vitals, no complicating factors. His recovery was textbook. His daughter had already booked flights home. Ether flagged him on a Wednesday afternoon. The flag appeared. On the monitoring dashboard, a discrete amber alert in the O. hospital's administrative back-end system, not visible to patients or most staff. It categorized him under a classification we designated ELI, which stood for End-of-Life Resource Allocation. The idea was that the system would help the hospital prepare quietly, administratively, so that palliative care teams and family liaisons could be gently positioned before a crisis occurred, rather than after. The on-call administrator that day, a woman named Priya, saw the flag, checked Breen's chart, found nothing concerning, and filed it as an anomaly for my review. Harold Breen died of a pulmonary embolism. 71 hours later, his daughter never made it back in time. We ran a full diagnostic. The system was functioning within normal parameters. Ether had detected what our post-mortem analysis later confirmed: a cascade of microsignals, a barely detectable slowing in leg movement pressure data, a 0.3% irregularity in overnight heart rate variability, a fractional shift in his vocal register during a nurse check-in that individually meant nothing, but together, to the AI, painted a picture no human clinician had been trained to see. The hospital's chief medical officer, Dr. James Thornton, was cautiously impressed. He asked me to keep the system running, but to expand the monitoring dashboard access to senior nursing staff. Over the next 6 weeks, Ether flagged 11 more patients. 11 died, every single one within 72 hours of the flag. Some within hours. The system was running at 100% accuracy, and nobody on the hospital board could quite decide whether to feel proud or terrified. I remember Thornton telling me over coffee one afternoon that it felt like having God's appointment book. I didn't laugh. By September, 6 months into deployment, Ether had flagged and correctly predicted 41 patient deaths. I want to let that number sit with you for a moment. 41. Not 41 out of 50, or 41 with a margin of error. 41 predictions. 41 deaths. Perfect correspondence. The medical community was beginning to take notice. A paper was being drafted. Thornton was in talks with 2 other hospital networks about licensing. I was being asked to attend conferences. My inbox was full of emails from researchers, journalists, and ethicists who wanted to understand what we'd built. And in the middle of all of that, on a Tuesday morning in October, I was in the server room running a routine performance audit when I saw something on the dashboard that made me set down my coffee very slowly and sit very still. A new flag. Not in the patient monitoring section. In a section of the interface I had not fully activated. A secondary monitoring module I had built during development as an experiment and then deliberately left dormant. It was designed to run passive analysis on all individuals who had significant time logged presence in the hospital's monitored zones. Long-term patients, certainly, but also staff. I had left it dormant because of the ethical implications. You cannot monitor employees for mortality risk without consent protocols, legal review, HR oversight. It was a feature I'd planned to revisit once the patient side rollout was stable, except somewhere in the overnight software update cycle. An automated script had toggled it on, and it had already found someone. Staff ID 0047. Elena. Vasquez, RN. Age 29, Ward 4B. The Flag was bright red, not amber, the patient risk color. Red, color I had assigned during development to designate high confidence, imminent. I had used it for the most acute patient cases. I had never, in 6 months of live deployment, seen it appear for a staff member. The confidence score beside her name read 97.4%. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called Priya. "Don't tell her," Thornton said. We were in his office, the three of us. Me, Thornton, and Priya, with the blinds drawn and the door locked at 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I had shown them the flag. I had explained the error in the update cycle. I had told them what the confidence score meant. "We can't not tell her," Priya said. "We tell her, and we have a lawsuit, a panic, and the entire Ether program under review by Thursday," Thornton said. "We disable the staff monitoring module, we run a diagnostic, and we treat this as the anomaly it almost certainly is. It has a 97.4% confidence score," I said. "It has never been wrong." Thornton looked at me carefully. "It has never been wrong about patients with underlying conditions, Marcus. Elena Vasquez is a healthy 29-year-old. Whatever it thinks it's detecting is an artifact. Harold Breen was healthy," I said. "He had a hip replacement. He had perfect vitals." Nobody spoke for a moment. "How long?" Priya asked quietly. "The flag classification is 72 hours from timestamp," I said. I looked at my phone. Wednesday morning, 6:47 a.m., so by Saturday morning. "Disable the module," Thornton said. "Run the diagnostic. Do not tell Elena Vasquez." That is a direct instruction. He left the room. Priya looked at me. I looked at the floor. I went back to the server room. I did not disable the module. I want to be honest with you about why I didn't follow Thornton's instruction. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't some principled stance about transparency. The truth was simpler, and I think more human than that. I was afraid. Not for myself, for Elena Vasquez. For a 29-year-old woman who had no idea that a machine in the basement had just written her name down. I pulled her personnel file. Elena had worked at Hargrove for 4 years. Night shift primary on Ward 4B, which handled post-surgical recovery. Her performance reviews were exceptional. She had been nominated for a Staff Excellence Award the previous spring. She had no disciplinary record, no extended sick leave, no reported incidents. She had an emergency contact listed, her mother. In Albuquerque, I sat in the server room with her file open on my screen and the red flag pulsing quietly in the corner of the Ether interface. And I thought about her mother in Albuquerque. Then I thought about something else in 41 previous flags. We had never intervened. That had been deliberate. We were in observation mode, studying accuracy, not testing whether intervention could change outcomes. The ethical framework of the study required passive monitoring only, but the ethical framework hadn't anticipated this. I was the one who built this system. If it was right, and I did nothing, I would spend the rest of my life knowing I watched it happen. And if it was wrong, if there was any possibility it was wrong, I needed to understand why, not for. Thornton's licensing deal. Not for the paper we were writing. For the 42 people that had flagged before her, who never had someone looking. I decided to find Elena Vasquez and tell her myself. She was finishing a night shift when I found her. In the staff break room on the 3rd floor at 7:15 a.m. She was eating a protein bar and scrolling her phone, still in scrubs. She looked up when I knocked on the open door, mildly annoyed in the way night shift nurses always look when someone from administration appears at the end of a long shift. Dr. Webb? She knew who I was. The ether rollout had involved all senior staff. I need to talk to you about something, I said. Can I close the door? She looked at me more carefully. Something in my expression, I think. She nodded. I sat down across from her. I told her everything. I watched her face change as I spoke. Not the way you might expect. Not immediate panic or tears. Elena Vasquez had the composure of someone who worked with mortality every shift, who had held the hands of patients as monitors flatlined, who had made calls to family members at 3 a.m. She processed what I told her with a stillness that I found, in that moment, both admirable and heartbreaking. When I finished, she was quiet for almost a full minute. 97.4%, she said. Yes. What does that mean? In real terms. What did it see in me? I don't fully know yet, I said. The system doesn't explain its reasoning in human-readable terms. It outputs a risk score and a time classification. I need to go deeper into the data logs to understand what signals it weighted. How long do I have? The flag is time-stamped at 72 hours from 6:47 this morning. She looked at her phone. Did the calculation. Saturday, 6:47 a.m. Okay, she said. Then we have 71 hours and 20 minutes to figure out what it knows. That day, Wednesday, I began pulling Elena's biometric data from Ether's logs. Every data point the system had collected on her over the 6 months. She'd been in the monitored zones. What I found was not what I expected. Elena's standard vitals were perfect. Heart rate, blood pressure, oxygen saturation, all within optimal ranges. No microfluctuations. No chemical signatures in her room ventilation that suggested physiological stress. Her pressure-based interaction data during patient rounds was consistent and strong. But there were 2 anomalies. The first was in the vocal stress analysis data. Over the preceding 3 weeks, Ether had logged a progressive increase in subvocal tension markers during Elena's interactions in one specific zone of Ward 4B, the corridor outside Room 412. Room 412 was currently occupied by a patient named Leonard Cole, 71 years old, admitted for post-cardiac surgery recovery. He had been flagged by Ether in amber 3 weeks earlier. Standard. Risk level. The second anomaly was more troubling. AETHER had analyzed Elena's eye movement data from corridor cameras, specifically the frequency and duration of her glances toward the medication storage room adjacent to the nursing station. Over the past month, the frequency had increased by 340%. I sat with that number for a long time. In my training data. Elevated medication room attention patterns had appeared in 2 previous patient cohorts. Both groups had shown it as a precursor to intentional. Self-harm.aether wasn't predicting that Elena would get sick. It was predicting that Elena was going to hurt herself. I called her immediately. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. I sent a message through the hospital's internal system. 40 minutes later, she walked into my office. She'd showered and changed. She looked, on the surface, fine. She looked the way I was beginning to understand she always looked on the surface. I pulled your data, I told her. I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with me. Not as a hospital employee, not for any record. Just honestly. She sat down. She waited. Are you okay? I asked. I mean, underneath the okay. Are you actually okay? The surface held for about 3 seconds. Then it did in single quotes T. She told me about Leonard Cole. He was her patient. Had been since he was admitted 6 weeks earlier. He was recovering from surgery, and the recovery was going badly. Not medically. Medically, he was stable. But Leonard Cole was a man who did not want to be stable. He had told Elena in a quiet voice one night when the ward was empty and the lights were low that he was tired. That he had said goodbye to everything he needed to say goodbye to. That he was ready. And Elena had listened. She had held his hand. She had come back the next night, and the night after that. She had become, over 6 weeks, the person he talked to about dying. He asked me something 2 weeks ago, she said. He asked if there was a way to make it easier. He wasn't asking me to do anything. He wasn't. He was just asking. Like he was asking the universe, and I was just there. What did you tell him? I told him I couldn't. She was looking at her hands. And I meant it. I really meant it. But I kept thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about what I could do. What I could access. What would be fast and painless and look like natural causes given his existing cardiac profile. She looked up at me. Her eyes were dry and absolutely wrecked. I was never going to do it, she said. I need you to believe that. I was processing it. The way you process impossible things that patients ask you. I was thinking about it so I could put it away. But the machine saw you thinking about it, I said quietly. She nodded slowly. The machine saw me thinking about it. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Ether hadn't detected a medical threat. It had detected a psychological one, a pattern of ideation, of moral conflict, of a compassionate person being slowly crushed by the weight of a choice she hadn't made and would never make, but was carrying every single day. It had watched her eyes drift toward the medication room. It had heard the tension in her voice every time she walked past. Room 412. It had measured the micro-tremors in her hands during medication rounds. It had cross-referenced all of it against its outcome training data and concluded, this person is approaching the threshold. And then it had classified her, not as sick, not as dangerous. As at risk of crossing a line that, once crossed, would end her one way or another. We sat in my office for 2 hours, called the hospital's staff counseling service, and arranged an emergency session off record with a counselor Elena trusted. I called the ward supervisor, and had Elena quietly reassigned off Leonard Cole's care team for the rest of the week, with a cover reason about staffing rotations. And then I did something I have thought about every day since. I went back to the Ether interface. The red flag was still there. Staff ID 0047, 97.4%. The timestamp counter was still running. I sat at the keyboard for a long time. Then I typed a manual intervention note into the system, a feature we'd built for administrator override, never used in live deployment. I tagged Elena's file with a status update. Subject engaged with support resources. Risk trajectory under active monitoring. Flag acknowledged. The system processed the note. For about 4 seconds, nothing happened. Then the red flag changed. It didn't disappear. It shifted color from red to a pale, muted orange. The confidence score dropped from 97.4% to 61.2%. The timestamp counter paused. I stared at the screen. My hands were shaking slightly. I noticed the system had responded to human intervention, not because I had hidden anything from it, or overridden it, or turned it off, but because I had given it new information. The information that someone had seen what it saw and had acted. It had recalculated. Elena attended 3 counseling sessions over the following week. She requested a temporary reassignment to a different ward, which was granted without explanation. Leonard Cole was moved to palliative care the following Thursday, where he had access to a full support team and daily visits from a dedicated patient-advocate. He passed away on a Sunday morning, 6 weeks later, with his daughter beside him. Elena was not in the building that day. She had taken a personal day. I don't know if she knew. Like to think she did. The Ether staff monitoring module was formally shut down 2 weeks after the Elena incident, following a legal review one personally initiated. I wrote the incident to the project's ethical risk assessment as an anonymized case study. Incident 4-2, and it is now cited in 3 separate academic papers on the unintended capabilities of ambient biometric AI systems in healthcare environments. Ether continues to run at Hargrove. Patient monitoring only. Revised data collection boundaries. Expanded consent protocols. Its accuracy rate is still 100%. I think about Elena Vasquez often, not because her story ended badly. It didn't. Or at least it didn't end the way the machine predicted. She's still working. She transferred to a pediatric ward last year, which she apparently loves. I think about her because of what her case revealed, about what we had built. Ether did not read minds. It did not access anything supernatural. It was a pattern recognition system fed an incomprehensible volume of data about human behavior and human outcomes, and it was better than any human at recognizing when someone was approaching the edge, not the medical edge, the human one, the place where a person stands and looks down and decides which direction to step. We had built something that could see people at their most private, most unguarded, most hidden, and it could see them not from their words or their conscious choices, but from the small, involuntary, unmistakable signals of a body and a mind under pressure. The things we don't even know we're broadcasting. The things we never chose to share. And the question I have spent every day since asking myself is not, Whether the system was right, it was right. The question is, if it can see that in Alana, what does it see in the rest of us? What would it flag if it were watching you? Not your medical records, not your search history, not the things you've said out loud, not the things you haven't said, the thoughts you've processed and quietly put away, the calculations you've run at 3 a.m. in the space between who you are and who you're afraid you might become. Ether doesn't judge those things. It doesn't punish them. It doesn't even fully understand them. It just sees them, and it writes your name down. The last thing I'll tell you is this. After the staff module was shut down, I ran one final query, a full audit of all data collected during its 11 active days. Standard procedure before a RCHIVING. In that time, the system had passively analyzed 847 staff members who passed through the monitored zones. It had flagged 23 of them. I never found out who they were. The data was anonymized at the point of archiving per the legal team's instruction. Those 23 flags, whatever they represented, whatever thresholds those people were standing near, disappeared into an encrypted archive that I no longer have access to. 20-3 people walking the corridors of that hospital, carrying something the machine could see and no human ever noticed. Maybe they're fine. Probably most of them are fine. But I think about those 23 names sometimes. On the nights I can't sleep, and I wonder if any of them are still standing at the edge. I wonder which direction they stepped. If this story stayed with you, you're not alone. The most unsettling part of psychological horror isn't the monster, it's the mirror. It's the moment you recognize something true about yourself in the story, and you realize the thing you were afraid of was already inside the room with you. If you're going through something heavy right now, the way Elena was, please talk to someone. A friend, a counselor, anyone. You don't have to carry it alone. And if you want more stories like this, real, slow, and deeply human, subscribe and stay close. The next one is already waiting.